Good day, children. We have already completed two parts of the lesson, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Now, we move on to the third part or the last part of the lesson, beginning from page number 21. So, let's start the lesson. In life, every man has twin obligations. Obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children. And he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. So, here Mandela is talking about how in every human life that a man has twin obligations or twin duties. Now, what are these duties that a man has in his life? First duty or obligation is towards his family, his parents, his wife and his children. And secondly, the man is committed towards his people, his community and his country. So, these are the two important obligations that a man has in his life according to Mandela. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. So, he says how in a very civil and humane society, that is in a very normal society, a man is able to fulfill all these obligations or these duties according to his behavior and ability. Inclination basically means the natural tendency of behavior of a human being. So, depending upon the behavior and ability of a man, the man will be able to fulfill all these two obligations. But in his country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. So, Mandela says how in South Africa, it was impossible for someone like him, which means a man who is born into a black family or an African family, okay, based on the color, to fulfill these two obligations, it was quite difficult. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. So, he says how in South Africa, if a man of color, that is here he is basically referring to the blacks in his country, if anyone in South Africa, they attempted to live as a normal human being, that is like a man who is dedicated towards his family and work, then that man is punished and isolated, kept away from others, okay. And he also says that if a man in South Africa tried to fulfill his duty towards his people, then he was inevitably ripped. Inevitably ripped means he was unavoidably ripped or taken away from his family and his home, and he was forced to live a life away from the existence of his family under secrecy and in rebellion or as a rebel. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father and a husband. So, he says that he did not in the beginning choose to give importance to his people above his family, but in trying to serve his people, he found that he was stopped or he was prevented from fulfilling his duty or obligation as a son, as a brother, a father and a husband. I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. So, he says how he was not born with this hunger to be free, rather he was born as a free human being. He says freedom in every manner, free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow moving bulls, So he's describing what freedom was for him as a young boy. So as a young boy, he was free to run in the fields near his mother's hut. He was free to swim in the clear stream which ran through his village. He was also free to roast mealies under the stars. Now, mealies is a kind of grain that you have over there, and that is in the night they used to roast these mealies and eat, and also ride on the backs of slow moving bulls. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. So he says how, as long as he obeyed his father and he followed or abided by the customs of my tribe, means he followed the customs set by the tribe that he belonged to, he was not troubled by any law of man or God. Okay, so he didn't have to fear anything. He was free in every manner. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. So he says how he realized that as a young boy, whatever freedom he enjoyed in his boyhood days or his boyhood freedom was just an illusion. What is an illusion? Illusion is something which appears to be real but it is not. Okay, and he also discovered as a young man that freedom had already been taken away from him, and he began to hunger for it, or he wanted to have this freedom. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedom of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. So he says in the beginning, when he realized that his freedom was taken away from him, or the only freedom that he wanted as a student was he wanted the freedom only for himself. He wanted this transitory freedom, or the not so permanent. Transitory means not permanent. So he wanted this partial freedom of being able to stay out at night. So he wanted to stay late out at night. He wanted the freedom for that. Then he wanted to read whatever books he pleased, and also to move wherever he chose to move. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I earned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. So he says as a young man when he was in Johannesburg, he earned for the basic and honorable freedom. Now what is this basic and honorable freedom he wanted? He wanted to achieve his potential by earning his money. Earning my keep is basically to earning his own salary, of marrying and having a family, to choose a woman he likes and have a family with the woman. And so all these freedom which is not obstructed or which is not stopped in a lawful life. But when I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. So he says that it was very slowly that he saw that not only was he not free, but all the brothers and sisters were also not free. Now these brothers and sisters, he is referring to his people. He also saw that it was not just his freedom that was curtailed or reduced, but freedom of every black person in the country, or everyone who looked like him. Okay, that is when I joined the African National Congress, and that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. So he joined the African National Congress, and he realized that the hunger for his own freedom became a greater hunger for obtaining or gaining freedom for his people. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated my life, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. So he says how it was this very desire for the freedom for his people to live their lives or to lead their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated his life, or that played a great role in his life, and he transformed, he was changed from a frightened young man to a bold man. And this desire drove the law-abiding attorney, lawyer. So it drove a lawyer to become a criminal. It turned a family-loving husband into a man who had no home. It forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. Who is a monk? Monk is a priest. Okay. I am no more virtuous or self-sacrificing than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. So he says that he is no more virtuous or self-sacrificing than the next man, but he found that he could not even enjoy the limited freedom that he had when he knew that his people were not free. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. So yeah, he says that freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. So he says that freedom is indivisible, or it cannot be separated. The chain on any one of his people were the chain on everyone, and that these chains which is put on his people were the chains that were put on him. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. So he says how the oppressor must be liberated or given freedom just like how the oppressed is given. Now, who is an oppressed and an oppressor? Oppressed is the people who are put down or ruled over by a ruling person, and oppressor is the person or the authority involved in ruling these oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. So he says that any man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred, and he is locked behind the bars of prejudice, that is, which is a strong dislike without any good reason, okay, and narrow-mindedness, okay, very narrow-minded person. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. So he says that he cannot tell that he is completely free if he takes away someone else's freedom, and similarly he is not free when his freedom is taken from him. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. So he says that both the oppressed and the oppressor are equally robbed, or they are taken away, or their humanity in them is taken away from them when they are under the title of an oppressed or an oppressor. So with this we come to the end of the lesson. So that's all for today, children. Thank you and have a nice day.